I think a new race would be incredibly hype. I think people would go nuts for a new race, and I think that a new race would sell this expansion. So that's what I would like to see, I think. Do you have a preference? Do you think it's still important that there are explorable maps with heart quests and dynamic events that don't hold metas at this point of the story? I'm going to hit you with a surprise mastery that I would throw in. You're a Tengu race, and you have Tengu gliding. You don't need a glider, and you have some special things that you can do, maybe a mix between a griffin and a glider. Hey, what's up, guys? It is Tom and Brock. We're back again. We're doing a part 2 in our series where we're looking at the new mini expansions that have been announced for Guild Wars 2, and we're just looking at features that we want to see, maybe things that they left out, and we're going to try to fill in the gaps with things that we want to see and just speculate and talk about all that stuff in this series. So I wanted to get into today, part 2 of the series, which we're going to be talking about new races and locations. In case you guys missed it, we talked about elite specs and new classes in part 1 of the series. So I'll leave a little link up here where you guys can go check that out if you want. But so new races. Brock, again, let's go to the blog post. New races were, absent from the blog post. Yeah. Yes, they were not mentioned. There was a lot of things not mentioned in the blog post, which is good for us because we get to make these videos speculating about it. But new races, I'll just throw it to you. Like, how important are new races to you in your mind moving forward? Especially, since elite specs are up in the air, we might not be getting more of those. Does that put more weight on, hey, I as a player, I really want to see a new race in this upcoming expansion?
Would be cool, yeah.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I think, like, to me, I've got characters on all the races. I like some more than others. Like, I still think the char move a little funky when I'm running doing jumping puzzles and stuff. I can't quite get used to it. But I would say that a new playable race would be a very cool perk, but not a deal breaker. Like, if there's no new races, like we said, ArenaNet didn't even hint at the possibility of any new playable race or anything like that. They've gone 10 years without adding new races into the game. 3 expansions, no new races. It would be a very cool thing, but I want to speculate and like say, oh, what if this could happen? But at the end of the day, if that doesn't happen, hey, it would have just been cool to have seen it,
Okay, so it's not a huge deal breaker for you.
No,
if you don't get a new race, kind of a thing.
No, but definitely still fun to like speculate about and be like, oh, what if, and how would they implement them?
Yeah. Well, I'll answer what I think about it from 2 different perspectives. So I'll do my personal perspective, and then kind of the perspective I think of a Guild Wars player, average Guild Wars player. Maybe, I'm not 100% sure, but so for me personally, I only play humans. So a new race. I mean, there is one new race that I maybe would do that we'll get into later that may excite me. But for me, I mean, I just mainly play humans. I like the way armor looks on humans. I like the way most of the outfits look. I just think it looks good. Like you mentioned, the char and some of the other, I don't know, just the you can't always see it on every race, and you can't always. Sometimes it clips, or sometimes it.
Yeah, you like the power fantasy of like, oh hey, what if I was in this world? What if I was this explorer, this ranger, who had a well-trained animal by my side, and you're not playing for the fantasy of like, oh, what if I was a Sylvari who was born in a pod like that?
Correct. Yeah. Yes, I very much view my character through the lens of myself through the character. 100%. I don't role play as something different. I mean, I role play in a way, but it's like me. Like, what decisions would I make? Kind of a thing if I was in this situation. So yeah, that's a good thing to point out, which is how I play. However, you kind of mentioned it. Guild Wars 2 has not got a race since it has launched.
Day one, yeah.
So I think a new race would be incredibly hype. I think people would go nuts for a new race, and I think that a new race would sell this expansion.
Absolutely.
If they did the one race I'm thinking of, which I'm sure we'll get into in a second, which everybody already knows what it is, but I think it would actually sell this expansion. I think it would be incredibly important. Not that you have to do it, but if they want to print money at ArenaNet, I think a new race should be on the table. So, I don't know. Do you agree? Do you think people would be just like super hyped for a new race because it's never been done before?
I agree. I mean, I think, if you want to talk about like a great selling feature for your new expansion, a new playable race, when there's only 5, you only have a choice of 5 in the game. All of a sudden now you're expanding
5 is not much,
right?
That's like hardly any.
Yeah, you increase that even by 1, and then like, it starts the hype train of what I really have always wanted to play as X, like,
right?
Even if that's not announced for the first expansion, if they open that door, that starts that cycle.
It's a big deal. That's a big selling point.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. So that's why I think races could be cool. So now, I don't know if we look at other games like how they've done races before. I'm a huge Star Wars Old Republic player. They've kind of put new races behind paywalls and stuff. Not very interesting the way they do it. Plus,
not like a new expansion, you get this new race kind of thing, but just kind of as the store goes on, like, oh, hey, did you want to play?
Yeah.
Okay.
And traditionally, like in those types of games, and I think, the story has been tied behind the class in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Now, I think if we want to go to another game like WoW, I think WoW they've done some interesting things. So I know if we go back to like Mists of Pandaria, right? Yeah. They introduced the panda. Everybody loves the panda. And so
I had students when I was teaching, like, oh yeah, I'm playing this game. I'm like, oh, is that the one with pandas? And they're like, oh yeah.
So
just trolling my students.
Yep. So you got a panda, but that Pandaria, say what you want to say about Pandas the race. Pandaria was my absolute favorite place to go in WoW. Sort of kind of like has like a Cantha vibe, like an Eastern vibe. You know what I mean? Super cool. The landscapes are amazing. Mountains, green.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, bamboo, like just such a pretty area. So, but they did it. They brought a whole new zone with a whole race and all that. So that was interesting. Later on, I think they've added the Volpera, which is like a fox kind of a thing, like a little fox. Reminds me of like a WildStar character. I don't know. Shout out if anybody played WildStar back in the day before NCSoft pulled the plug on that one. And then they did with Dragonflight, they did the Drakthir, which was like a race class baked into one. Like you can't be one without the other. A Drakthir is a Evoker, and Evoker is a Drakthir. Like that's just the way it is. So very interesting. And it was on the Dragon Isles, which is like a zone for them, which was cool. So that's one way they've done it. And then they've also introduced a system, which is cool. I don't know if Guild Wars would ever do this, but they've introduced what's called allied races, which are basically like take a human and then you make them, for in WoW's example, a Kultiran human, like a human from another area. Their features are a little different, but you're still a human, kind of a thing.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Or like an elf instead of a night elf, or a blood elf, you have a void elf, kind of a thing. So it'd be taken like, let's say, for example, if another tree was discovered and there was a different type of Sylvari.
Right.
Or something that turned out to be in a different location in the world.
Yeah.
Or if they brought up humans from another civilization, or so I don't know, that could be, I don't know. That's kind of the way just other games have done it, for example. Now
I think that might be kind of hard for Guild Wars 2 to pull off, just because, like if you just think about character creation and like okay, the Sylvari, you can be like more tree-y, or you can be more mushroomy, or you can be more woodsy. Like they kind
Yeah.
of have. I mean, it's just kind of cosmetic differences, but
Right.
they do give you a variety. So it'd be interesting to see how, if they were going to do something, if ArenaNet was going to introduce new race with like this allied race spin on it, how can they actually make it feel like a different race?
And I'm pretty sure with the WoW allied races, I think there's lore behind it, but I don't think you do like a whole nother story or anything. It's just like, it's just a new flavor. Like, oh, I'm going to be this kind of human instead.
Gotcha.
So, to your point, I think it makes more sense if ArenaNet goes all in on a race, a new race, new locations, the whole shebang. So, I'll just throw it to you, Brock, since I'm the basic MMO player who plays, humans only. What are your, I don't know, what are some races that you might want to see? And then what do you think ArenaNet would do? Or some of them like pie in the sky? Or do you have a list and an order of what you're wanting to see?
I have a list. It's a short list of what I think looks cool, would look cool, what I would want to play, what I think players would want to play, and what I think ArenaNet could feasibly do. There's so many races, and like you running around the starter zones. Oh, hey, here's an Etten. Oh, here's a ghost. Like that's okay. Those aren't maybe like actual, but like you can't just do anything under the sun. I think really if ArenaNet is going to do new actual races, there's three that come to mind, and that would be the Kodan, the Largos, and of course the Tengu.
Ding, ding, ding. There it is. Yeah. So, okay. So, Largos, I don't think that would appeal to me just off the rip hearing it. You know what I mean? Kodan, I could maybe, be persuaded on that one. But obviously Tengu, I mentioned earlier, I think if there's any race that I would try, any new race especially, I think it would be Tengu.
Yeah.
And
if ArenaNet really wants to print money on this expansion and introduce a new race, Tengu has to be, almost has to be the first new playable race they introduce.
Why would you be hyped for Tengu? Like, what are some of the things that get you excited about that race specifically?
Like they are in the world enough. Like from the first time you go to Lion's Arch, or even if you're starting out in, I think it's the Metric Province, and I always forget the two forest zones, if it's the Savari starting zone or the Asura starting zone, where it has the wall to the Dominion of Winds on the eastern edge.
Yes.
They're blended together so well.
I believe it's the Savari zone.
The Savari one? Okay.
I think so. I don't quote me, but yes, I think you're right.
I don't go back to the starting zones very often.
Right.
Sorry.
Right.
But like when you first meet the Tengu by that wall, and you're like, oh cool, I want to go in there, and you're like,
you can't go in here.
There's no portal to go to that zone. Like, okay, maybe later. And then I remember back in the day when Living World Season 1 was out, and there was the whole attack on Lion's Arch, and you're like you're trying to get people together in Lion's Arch and escape the city and retake it later on. There's actually there's another entrance to the Dominion of Winds on the map there to the west side of Lion's Arch, and you get close to the wall there, and their archers start raining down arrows on you because they are so stay away, this is our area and you cannot come in. They're in the world, they seem cool, you get to fight some of them as enemies when you go to the forest in Heart of Thorns, like a different tribe of them. You see them again in End of Dragons, again a different kind of tribe of them. They've got the diversity of a playable race. I just think they seem so cool and would fit so well with the existing races in Tyria.
Yeah, I'm not don't want to say this is a conspiracy or anything, but I kind of think them being in End of Dragons was not a coincidence.
Oh, kind of
possibly.
We're teasing something here, kind of thing.
Maybe I don't know. it wouldn't surprise me. So, yes, for all those reasons, I think yes, Tengu that you mentioned. I have a couple of two other things specifically that excite me about Tengu. The first is just the character model. I think the character model is super interesting.
Yeah.
Right? Just like the bird model, but it's stood up enough. It looks very pronounced. You know what I mean? Like, I think armors and all kind of stuff would look really good on the Tengu.
Right.
I think you could do a lot of cool stuff with character creation with Tengu, like from, colors, from feathers to beaks or however you wanted to do it. Like, plumes, like if they had different.
Right.
I don't know. I just think it would look cool. Tengus just look cool. So
if you've seen any of the concept art for the Tengu, like they can be so wildly different and diverse that you can make it like, oh yeah, this is the type of character I want to play.
Right.
Well, I mean the Koden are cool. Like it's a cool big polar bear. Okay, your default hue is going to be white though, right? Like
probably.
That's how do you make that interesting? How do you make that diverse? But the Tengu just naturally is going to be one of those races. Yeah,
it's just going to be awesome in character customization. Another thing for me is I think, and I don't want to get like way ahead of myself, but I think a Tengu zone would just look super cool.
Yes.
So I'll pause on that though. We'll talk about that in a second, but I do think that is a thing. And then the other thing is, for me, this is going to be like very just me specific. As a ranger who likes to play longbow, I feel like traditionally we've seen Tengu wielding bows a lot.
And so they use that archery style.
So a Tengu ranger specifically really like speaks to me, and I would be like, yeah, this is awesome. I really want a Tengu ranger. That sounds super cool. Yeah. Just from a class fantasy type of thing.
Meanwhile, like I'm thinking Tengu thief. Like, yeah,
for sure.
Fits that niche.
Yep. And so those are some of the reasons why Tengu. And like you said, no new, only new class we got was, in Heart of Thorns. So we don't foresee new classes. It seems like maybe the least likely thing.
Right.
Elite specs are very much, up in the air, leaning towards no elite specs.
Yeah.
So if there is something that they could do, I think it's races, and I think they will do it. I don't know have a percentage, but if I had to put money on it, I know people make a big deal about player housing, and I'm sure we'll get to that in one of our videos coming up. But I don't really see there being a bigger seller in my mind of an expansion, unless it's just something off the wall that we're not thinking about yet, like a new feature that hasn't been added other than housing or something. But I just think at least for current fans of the game, Tengu is like, man, that's where it's at. So
here's another, like, to play off that, I'd say if any of the previous 3 expansions had released with a new race, I would have been more hyped for that than I was for like mounts in the Path of Fire. Like, and at the end of the day, the mounts are fantastic. Like they're awesome. Like that, it just makes like completely changes the way you play. And I'm glad that we have the mounts that we do. But I think at any point, like, if they had said new race,
how cool would it have been to get like a desert race?
Oh,
like in Path of Fire or something like that would have been crazy. So cool. You're right. That would have been really big. So yeah, to your point, please, you got to put in Tengu. I think it makes too much sense, and I think it's doable. So if it is doable, how do they do it? That is the big question. How does a game that's been out for 10 years that has only 5 races that are the story is very integrated into your race.
Right.
How does ANET implement that and do it well? I think our minds go to story, but before we get to story, I want to talk about zones. So
Okay.
they've announced in the blog post, right? We're getting 2 zones, I believe, at launch. Am I saying that correctly? And then they're going to bring maybe another zone later in the
Yeah, their exact
expansion.
wording is 2 new maps at the launch of the
Maps.
expansion,
Okay.
and another map later on. Now,
Okay.
the way that I read that is like I think that means 2 new zones plus 1 zone later on, or 2 new zones, but then one of them is going to be expandable with new area. Maybe I my lens of interpretation is like 3 new zones is how I view
Okay.
that per expansion.
Again, the blog post being very vague and
Yeah.
not giving us the info that we're desperately looking for.
Just use
Okay.
the word zone and like this would be much clearer.
Then map. Yeah. Okay. So let's just run with it. ANET's bringing Tengu, right? So the 2 maps at launch. I'm assuming if you're bringing a new race, then the expansion maps, to an extent, at least the first, I would probably say both of the first 2 maps have to be connected some way to the race.
Yeah.
Right? How would you, do you have an idea of how you would maybe, what those maps would look like, the 2 launch maps that came at the beginning of the expansion?
And maybe again you can speak to like World of Warcraft and how Mists of Pandaria, how they incorporated that, how much of the map was new or whatever. Like I don't remember. I just knew people who played that. But I would say that if let's run with this idea. Tengu is in the game, 2 new maps at launch of Tengu expansion. I think one of those maps should be the new race's home city. Like Divinity's Reach, like the Grove, like one new map where it's just like pure exploration, lore, story, getting a feel for like what this race is like, how this race does their housing, how this race does their merchant stalls and setup and architecture and all that kind of stuff. You get all like the feel for that race. But then the other map that maybe comes out at launch is also related to that race too, but it pushes the story more.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think if I did it, I don't know if I would integrate their city into like, okay. So do we think, I'll just ask you this question. Do we think the expansion will launch with a meta map? Like one of the 2 maps is going to be a meta map?
I feel like that's the case because they meta maps have population. That's like new map, new metas always have new population.
Okay, so here's what I would do then. If you're getting 2 maps at launch, I would kind of make it a blend. So I would put their capital city kind of like as a part of a map that also included. So think of like Queensdale and Divinity Reach, but maybe not a separation, like you have to walk through a portal. Or if you do a portal, I would make their home world instance or city kind of like a third launch map, like you know what I mean? Because I think at launch, I think it, like you said, it is important to have a meta at launch, I think.
Yeah.
Because meta players, that they want that. That's like some people, that's their main gameplay loop is metas. So I think that is important. Also, though, for me, one of the reasons I loved Path of Fire is there was so much exploration in the maps, right? And they were flat, and you could just zoom around on your mounts, and you could. So I personally really love maps that are exploration oriented, like jumping puzzles, vistas. It could be traditional hearts if you want. Tons of dynamic events everywhere.
Right.
So I would love a map that contains that. That's like a new player coming in would get a kind of a taste of Corteria through that kind of map, like, hey, but then they also get a taste of post Heart of Thorns maps with these metas in this other map. And however they wanted to do the city would be fine with me. If they want to integrate it into the explorable map, just make it a place you can visit. Or if they want to make it like a tiny instance like the Grove or something, kind of tacked on to Caledon Forest, kind of a thing. So that's what I would like to see, I think. Do you have a preference? Do you think it's still important that there are explorable maps with heart quests and dynamic events that don't hold metas at this point?
I yes, I as a player who just like I play on alts that are at different parts in the story that have different levels of map completion. Like earlier today, I was going to fish in a mainland Tyria zone, and a dynamic event popped up, and I was like, sure, while I'm here, why not? You know,
Cool.
still getting some loot from that. Like it may not be like the most efficient like loot farming, but it was fun, and I know that event, and I was like, oh yeah, hey, I can do this. Other people showed up too. It wasn't just me soloing. So those dynamic events still make the world feel alive,
Yeah.
And I think even though I kind of view it as all right, at launch there's a city map and then there's a meta map. It would be kind of cool if the city map maybe wasn't exactly like Divinity's Reach or the Grove or Holbreck, but there was some incorporation of some dynamic events and hearts into the city itself. Kind of look at
Okay.
Seitung Province or even New Kaineng City. Those aren't capital city maps that have zero dynamic events. Those
Right.
are open world maps where there is a city, there's a large residential area there, there's a large population in this map, and then hey, if you go offshore, there's a leviathan swimming in the ocean. You
Yeah.
have to go
Yeah.
fight it. So maybe that's the right way to do a new race's home city map,
Yeah.
and
Right.
also still get that meta if you're releasing two maps at launch.
Okay. The other cool thing, like I mentioned before, was I think a Tengu map would just look super cool, right? Now, I don't know if it would be like the Itzel or if you would take it back to like a Heart of Thorns, but they're obviously a bird species, so you would think like maybe a canopy map could be
Yeah.
super cool. Again, it would be I love the color palette in Guild Wars. I love the really vibrant maps, so you would think they could make one again that's very jungle-esque or lots of greenery.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. What
How
do you think a map
how
might
cool
look
would
like?
that be if for the last 10 years we haven't been able to look inside the Dominion of Winds. You can see the wall around the city from multiple zones. But then, if they open those doors and you walk in and, on the world map, there's this big gray area right in the right in the center. You can't really observe, but once you get in there and it's just like bright greens, like floral,
A
like
rainforest or
right,
something?
just like in the
Yeah,
heart of Tyria that like is there because of the race that is there. They've grown this up.
like an oasis in an extent to
Yeah, like
Tyria.
that would just be like, again, kind of shows the breadth and depth of the Tyrian landscape. But like I think that would be super awesome to have something like that right there smack dab in the middle of core Tyria.
Yeah. No, I think it would look incredible. So, yes, the race looks good. The map, I think, would look great. So, before we transition into, which I think is probably the thing that's the most controversial, or how do they work out, which is the story, I'm going to hit you with a surprise mastery
Okay.
that I would throw in. You're a Tengu race, and you have Tengu gliding. You don't need a glider, and you have some special things that you can do, maybe a mix between a griffin and a glider. So, for example, in WoW, they just, they introduced dragon riding, but the new race Drakthir also has Drakthir flying because they're technically their own dragon.
Okay.
And so it's kind of a lesser version of dragon riding. You can't fly as long, as far. It's not as powerful. And it's like on a longer cooldown, like a 2-minute cooldown or something. I don't know. What do you think about Tengu just being able to take flight and glide around? Wouldn't that be crazy?
That would be really cool.
Yeah.
Like again, it kind of gets to that like that power fantasy of like, oh yeah, I'm this bird race and I can fly. Makes sense. Makes sense with the theme. Makes sense with their physiology. And then I think about like, all right, so now does that mean that now there's a broken race
Don't
because
care.
inherently
Don't care.
they have flight. Do all the other races have to get something
Don't care.
special? Or are
Don't
the
care.
Asura
World
going to
of
be like
Warcraft didn't. They don't.
especially good at tunneling underground because they're subterranean? Like what's I
Now
I I
you
started
make
seeing
a good
problems.
point. No. I don't care. It needs to be fun. Fun is the
That's true.
key. Whatever is fun is fun. Now,
The
to
rule
your
of fun
point,
wins.
though, to your point, they could redo racial stuff for other classes and make them much cooler.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Add a, what do you say? Like a,
Make the Norns shape changing actually functional.
yes, shape change into some sort of animal that can traverse a little faster.
Mhm.
You know, make humans give, or Asura have like a blink ability.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Give the Sylvari, I don't know, they can tunnel underground. I don't know. It could be something,
Yeah.
you know, but I think it would be a huge mistake. Not a huge mistake. I don't know. I just think it would be so amazing
Yeah.
if Tengu got their own Tengu flying mastery.
hmm
Wow. Everyone would make a Tengu. It would be,
Yeah.
it'd be hype. It would be crazy.
It's the end of the human female meta. It is now Tengu meta.
So true. So true. So yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to throw that one out there. I thought of that earlier and it got me really excited for a second to think of
I
that.
agree. That would be really cool. And maybe I don't know. Again, I think of like how to make this balanced, how to make it not broken, and like I could see a way where like
Yeah.
you can totally do that in the domain of winds or in the dominion of winds.
Right.
There's like Tengu exclusive updrafts, and then hey, maybe there's Tengu exclusive updrafts in the world.
Or maybe in the world it just acts like regular gliding when you're in Corteria.
Mhm.
But yes, maybe there is something special, you know, in whatever
How
their
your
zone
race
is that they
interacts
get a
with the
little more something with it. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. Anything would be cool. I would love it. So that's why it came today
agree.
to watch the show. That was our one good idea. So
Tengu can fly.
so okay, well let's get into the complicated part of a new race, right? So the zone, all that's cool. The model is cool. You know, the class fantasy for me playing a Tengu Ranger is cool.
Yeah.
But how do you do a Tengu story? How do you do a story for a new race when you've only had 5 races and all those races' stories have been tied to the Dragon Saga, the personal story at this point?
Yep.
Should a new racial story be detached from the old personal story, in your opinion? What does that look like? We'll just start there.
100%. If there's a new playable race, you should not go back and fight Zaitan from 10 years ago and then have to battle Scarlet and watch the awakening of Mordramoth. That's cool. That is a great story, and I have had fun doing that on multiple characters. But you know, if you're playing this new race, honestly, like I'm a veteran player to this game. I'm not going to go back and do that on now, like, you know, a 9th or 10th character. I don't need to. And a new player coming into the game, I don't think needs to do that because ArenaNet has said they're going like we've got End of Dragons last year. Like the Dragons cycle is over.
Yeah.
That storyline is over. They want to move on to other stories. And so I think a new playable race, you know, if it is Tengu, they should be able to jump in and have their own personal story that is contemporary to today's Tyria, and then that should spin into and that should be tied to the story of the expansion. What is the threat that has allowed us to that brings the Tengu to the world stage? Why are they now breaking down their walls and interacting with the rest of us?
So they do have a personal story. It is just unique to them. It is totally separate than what the old personal story was to all the races. They start their personal story in the new zone, their zone, right? Now, that doesn't mean that their personal story can't take them around Tyria,
right?
To all of core Tyria, into the new expansion zones even. Hey, their personal story could take them into Heart of Thorns, could take them into the maps in Path of Fire.
Yeah,
But
depending on
I like what you're
how much
saying.
ArenaNet wants them to be able to wants to open those gates to pass content to this
Hmm.
new race. I think it's a great idea. Hey, Tengu, you've been isolationist for now years and years and years. You're back on this. You're back on the world stage. There's a threat to your home, but
Yes.
you got to go out in the world and you got to level up. You got to find out how the
Yep.
world works and come back ready to defend your homeland or whatever the story is going to be. You
And
know?
we're inviting the current races in to help us in that
Yes.
story. There
Yeah.
will be, of course, there'll be an expansion storyline, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
that's when where current races will come in. We'll do the expansion storyline, but a Tengu will have the expansion storyline plus their personal storyline, which I
Right.
think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I don't.
Actually,
I don't. I know ArenaNet's going to do it because they love to do it, but I basically, I chuck if I get a level 80 boost, I chuck it. I don't want to get
mm,
boosted up to level 80, and especially I don't think that's good for new players. Like, hey, if you are
yeah,
brand new to Guild Wars 2, you bought this expansion because you want to be a bird person and fly around, and you know that like your friends have told you that it's going to be a
mm-hmm,
brand new story. You don't have to worry about any of the old content, and like you shouldn't just fast forward to the end of the leveling experience. You should learn the class, you should learn the world, and then kind of go in and like you're more invested there, I think.
yeah. No, I agree. And there is still some problems with past expansions. The biggest one in my mind is mounts
Mm-hmm.
being tied to Path of Fire.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is you're really you're asking a new player to come in, "Hey, come play End of Dragons. This is our new stuff. Yeah, we'll
Mm-hmm.
give you like a kind of a raptor that kind of works and give you gliding, but in essence, you come in and you're like, I'm in End of Dragons. I want to beat End of Dragons and play it, but then I got to go play a whole nother expansion to get the
To
cool
unlock the
mounts.
masteries for that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so it's that I see that as maybe that's a whole nother video. We'll bring up some of the issues with a 10-year-old game and
Right.
some of the solutions. But as a solution for a new racial story, I think you're right. I think they need their own personal story that will take them around Tyria, introduce new players to Tyria everywhere. They'll also go through the expansion story because you're right. The Dragon Saga, in effect, it's over. People can,
Mm-hmm.
of course, go back and play it and catch up on all of that with older races, and that makes
Yeah.
sense. But I don't know if you've been keeping up with Preach Gaming from World of Warcraft. He's a huge World of Warcraft creator. He's went over to Final Fantasy recently and big time, and
Mm-hmm.
so he's been playing through Guild Wars 2
Yeah, I
as a
caught
project.
I caught part of one of the streams.
Okay. Okay. I haven't watched tons of his streams, but I've been watching his videos, like his
Mm-hmm.
monologue videos about stuff. And it's clear to see from a new player coming in blind, the old personal stories are not good. I say not good. They haven't aged well, is the
Yeah.
best way to put it. Then the way that ArenaNet delivers story now is so much better than how they were delivering story at the launch of the game.
Yeah.
And so that I think that's the biggest reason why a new player does not need to go back. They don't need a personal story like that. They need the newest version of storytelling
Mm-hmm.
that ArenaNet can give. And
Mm-hmm.
so,
The
yes,
ambient storytelling, the exploration for more detail as you're going around, like that, like how it's delivered instead of just
yeah,
read this letter and then get the reverse shot, like kind of cutscene thing. Like it's
yep, yep,
that was I loved it when I first started playing the game. Like, okay, cool. This is all voice acted. That's awesome.
yeah,
But now it's gone to a whole nother level where
yeah,
again, like you said, if a new player to the game jumps in with the new race and they wonder what's going on, like what is all this, like everyone's talking about, like, oh, there's a Dragon Bash festival, what is that, like what do you mean you've
mm-hmm,
killed the dragons? I think ArenaNet could easily put in like an NPC in Lion's Arch or
yeah,
wherever that kind of gives a recap of here's the story of the dragon cycle. And if
yeah,
that incentivizes a brand new player with a brand new race to go back and play all the way through the level 80 Zaitan fight and go
mm-hmm,
into Heart of Thorns and like face Scarlet and Path of Fire and Balthazar and all this, like you want to do all that stuff, cool, great. But that was the story that the 5 original races we got with the release of the game. That was the story
Yeah.
they played. New
Yeah.
story, new races. You're gonna want your own adventure.
Even in End of Dragons, right? When you come in, you have to, if you're a new player, you have to create a character.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not like thrown into End of Dragons right away. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I think you could get there and you can play it if you wanted to just jump straight into End of Dragons, you can.
Right.
But as of me, if I would have come in and created a new player, I would have been thinking, yeah, but there's all this stuff. Like, I need to know the background of
Right.
who I am and what I'm doing.
Yeah. Brand new player,
And
you use your
so,
level 80 boost, and then all of a sudden, like some all of a sudden you have a radio, and like someone named Anka is like gonna take you on a ship. Like, oh, this place has ships. Like, you're gonna be lost.
it just doesn't work. New expansions don't work for the old races as much. Now, if you come in and you're like, hey, Tengu, new race, it just makes too much sense to you start in your own zone. You experience that story. You get plugged into mounts and gliding like right away. You get skiffs. Like, let's get the new players caught up to. Guild Wars has always been about get to the fun, right?
Right.
The quality of life, to skip all the bad stuff with the other MMOs, the meaningless grinds, and and so they need to take that approach with the expansions. How do we get players to the expansion content? If they want to go back and experience the old content at some point, it's great. It's all there. You have 10 years worth of content. But let's get them to the fun stuff first. Like the stuff that is most relevant, the coolest stuff, the coolest masteries, the coolest everything. I think just makes too much sense. You know, I don't know. I guess a little side thing before we go. Are there any, I know this was really Tengu heavy and we use that as an example of what we wanted to see, but are there any other locations that you're interested in not tied to race, or in general, do you just want to see the map expanded? Like, what are you thinking at this point?
I think that's a perfect way to say it. Like, when End of Dragons came out and we got Cantha, all of a sudden now, like, how the edges of the map spread so much, like specifically going south to Cantha, and we get to see the scope of the unending ocean, home of the Largos, by the way. Like, you could make some zones in there, but like I'm all about, like, if we're, if our hypothetical, oh yeah, ArenaNet releases new races, if this is all just this is fiction, this doesn't end up happening, where are the new places that ArenaNet can go? I think they just need to keep expanding the borders of the map, like keep pushing
fill in
northeast.
the gaps.
Yeah, go to the far Shiver Peaks, fill in the gaps. What's in the Wizard's Tower? Go to the Blood Legion homelands? What's the man, I'm totally blanking on the name. The Woodland Cascades. Yeah. In Kryta, like the northern part of Kryta.
I would love to see Kryta explored more. As a human player, I'm like, yes, that would be awesome.
You don't like just these 5 zones? Like, I just want them to keep exploring the map bigger and bigger, even if it's not tied to a race. And like the Gyala Delve, the newest map that they released with the current, I guess, release. I don't know. It's not expansion. It's not Living World. It's
like a quarterly update, maybe, like they're going to be doing.
Yeah. That, like, it expanded Cantha, which is awesome. I'm loving that. And that's, even though I feel rushed when I'm in that map, I really like seeing Cantha explored more.
Yes.
Just more zones, pushing the boundaries, keep going. It's awesome.
Guild Wars is about what's around the corner. What hidden underwater cave is there? What, you know what I mean? So yes, just all of the above, more of that kind of thing. So I agree, and I'm sure, we'll get into maybe a story speculation, episode at some point about what kind of stories we want to hear, which could dictate where we go on the map. You know what I mean? What parts of the map open up. So, man, Brock, why am I so hyped for Tengu right now? Like, I honestly am like so hyped. I don't want to build it up too much in my mind, be a typical MMO player who overhypes things, but man, Tengu It'd be the best. I don't know. I'm looking forward to it.
It would
if they do
be
it.
like new races. As we've been talking about it, like I've been thinking about more and more, and like if there were only 5 in the original game, new races is almost like it's almost kind of that teasing of like, hey, new game coming out, like it's a whole new way to play. It's that sort of hype that I kind of feel it too about, like it's a brand new, not just a new map, but it's a whole new way to experience the world. I think that's the really coolest part about it.
I agree. And Tengu gliding, of course, because that would happen. So yeah, 100%. So guys, thank you for joining us today. I would say this is a big topic. If you guys have ideas for races or what a new zone would look like, whether it's Tengu, whether it's something else, maybe some interesting masteries that could be thrown in, that I know that wasn't really the focus of this video, but hey, maybe there's something that just makes too much sense. Let us know in the comments. Give us a like and subscribe if you like this type of video. This was only part 2 in the series, so of course we have many more videos planned where we're going to kind of fill in the gaps of the now infamous blog post from ArenaNet that's very light on details, and we're going to keep trying to fill in the details for you guys and for ourselves on what we're looking forward to with mini expansions. So until next time, we'll see you guys later.
Yeah.